Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So I still haven't fully decided what I'm gonna do as far as reviews or wrap-ups go. These are the first 5 books that I read in January, and I really want to talk about all 5 of them. So as of right now, these are the best books, and these are the last 5 books that I read. But I started the year out pretty well. All of these are solid 4-star reads for me. Let me preface that by saying it takes a lot for me to 5-star a book. A book needs to give me like a hell of a book hangovers for me to 5-star it, or just like give me the like jaw-dropping ending for me to 5-star it. So 4 stars is pretty much like as high as I generally get in rankings. All of these books did that for me, so I want to talk about them. So the first book that I read in the brand new year in 2018 in January was Foolish Hearts by Emma Mills. This is the book that I got in my uppercase and Owlcrate. This is the Owlcrate cover, in case you're curious why it might look different from your copy, but I was just feeling the need for a really quick, fun book to start the year off, and like, I didn't want to start in a slump. So contemporary is generally my go-to when I want to not put myself in a slump and just fly through and have a really fun reading experience and keep me in the reading mood. So I picked this up just because I am trying to read my subscription books somewhat close to the month that I received them, but this was such an amazing choice for me to pick up. I adored this book. This is super nostalgic as far as just your high school experience or teenage years. The way it's written definitely puts you back in the mindset of being a teenager and what it's like with friendships and with guys and relationships and just dealing with being a social teenager. I feel like it captured the essence of that beautifully. It also had the play A Midsummer Night's Dream in it. The kids are doing that in their school, and that's my favorite Shakespeare play, so anytime it's thrown into a story, I love it. But basically, the characters in this are so relatable. Also, I laughed out loud so many times reading this book. Like, Emma Mills, you got that, like, sarcastic snark down. Every time our main character, like, said something or replied in a witty way, I snorted all over my book. That's how funny it was. And it takes a lot for me to actually like physically react to a book. I was laughing through most of this book. Just the banter between the characters had me dying. The love interest in this, Gideon, was just so quirky and fun. He was so great. He was so refreshing from the stereotypical like bad boy or new boy in town who's mysterious. This guy was so real. He was just like a class clown that everybody loved. Everybody knew that he was just kind of like weird and funny, but everybody loved him because of it. He was so lovable. I'm gonna say the word love like 5 times in this review. I just loved it. There's one. If you guys are looking for a really fun, get you out of a reading slump read, this is definitely it. It's funny, it's nostalgic. I loved it. I loved it so much. The next book that I picked up, well, I was reading them simultaneously, to be honest, and that was Renegades by Marissa Meyer. So when she came out with this, I had mixed feelings because I'm one of the few people, I am not on the superhero bandwagon. I like superhero stories, it's just not my go-to genre. But you know what is my genre? Villain stories or anti-hero stories. I love them. I eat them up. I want all of them in my life. They're my favorite. I just love when a person just starts turning and you're just like, oh, yes. Basically, this is about a teenage girl who is in a world where like superheroes are known. They're a thing. Society is used to them, protecting them and taking care of them. And basically she's let down by these group of superheroes known as the Renegades. So she kind of joins forces with an anti-Renegades group. There's many of them out there trying to take the Renegades down because they don't like the hero concept and they don't think that society always needs to be protected. I loved it. Basically, in the prologue, as soon as you set the tone of a villain, like their backstory, I'm hooked. As soon as like something really messed up happens to them and they are just like done with being good, I get that like feeling in my stomach where I'm just like, yes, rise into the rage, it's gonna be amazing. I'd switch into like Sith mode. Oh, I was so into it. As soon as they were like, come on, my little nightmare, I was like, yes. This is not a very coherent review. I really enjoyed this book. There we go. I just thought that it was really good. I'm not super connected to the characters yet, but anytime that they introduce a new character with a new gift or superpower or whatever, I get really intrigued, so that's kind of selling it for me. I think that the powers are really unique. Like Sketch's power, where he can draw anything into existence, is amazing, and where they took that, I loved it. This is going to be completely spoiler-free, no worries. But I just really like the direction this is going. I'm not super invested in the story quite yet, but I really enjoyed the whole experience while reading it. So that's why this is a 4-star and not 5-star for me. I'm not hooked, but I'm intrigued. So I'm gonna highly recommend this if you're looking for a villain story or just a really fun, somewhat lighthearted superhero story. I enjoyed it. It was solid. The next book that I picked up I figured I should read because I have an arc of it, and that is Reign of the Fallen by Sarah Glenn Marsh. This, I believe, comes out, probably is already out by the time you're seeing this video. This comes out at the end of January. Really cool concept. Basically, this was being blurbed as an LGBT plus necromancy high fantasy for YA. That alone was like, yeah, I need to read that. Also, I'm a huge fan of Sarah Glenn Marsh. Fear the Drowning Deep was like one of my favorite books last year. I just loved her writing. It's so atmospheric and immersive into the world that you're in. I just loved it. So this is her take on YA high fantasy. I think that this book was setting up a lot. This book, I enjoyed it. I didn't fly through it, but I loved the main character. Odessa is a bisexual necromancer in a world where necromancers are pretty common and they work for the king. All of the royalty pretty much demands that when they start feeling monstrous, they get killed and then brought back to continue reigning in a peaceful manner. That's kind of how the world is set up, and our main character is the best necromancer in this kingdom. So that's basically like the plot of the story, and then we get into the relationships with her and with her friends who also have like these powers. And it gets dark. It gets really dark. I think that this was mostly a setup book. Like, I think the story is really gonna take off from here on out, but it took a lot to kind of get to that point. And the main character is just badass. I love reading about a really badass female protagonist, and she is definitely it, but it's very real. This has a lot of trigger warnings for kind of drug use and withdrawal and depression in it. So if those are words that you want to avoid in your life, avoid this one. But otherwise, for me, when I hear stuff like that, I'm like, oh, that's intriguing. So this book tackles a lot of really diverse topics. It tackles, obviously, LGBT plus diversity there. It tackles mental health, it tackles addiction in a fantasy world, and it was done really well. Like, it just flowed with the story. It was awesome. So I'm gonna recommend this. If you guys haven't picked this up yet, definitely do it. Next book that I picked up, if you guys watched my book haul video, I will leave it linked down below. I went through an ACOMF withdrawal. I have an issue where I belong to a lot of fan groups of Sarah J. Maas and the ACOTAR series in general. So whenever I see a whole bunch of memes talking about Feyre and the inner circle, I just have to reread them. But I always am looking for books that are going to give me similar feels as that series does. So this book showed up. This is called Rhapsodic by Lara Thalassa. This is kind of a lesser known book. I believe it's self-published, but a lot of people say it's so similar to ACOMF. If you have a book hangover and you've already reread them and you need something more, pick this up. And I'm gonna be honest, this is a quick and dirty ACOMF. Like, this is not as epic as that series is, but it is almost an identical story. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, because if you are a fan of that series like I am, anything that's gonna come close to it is gonna kind of like wet your whistle. It's gonna take care of the urges to want to reread the series again. So that's what this is. We are following Calypso, who is a siren. So basically, she is in a modern world. This is not a high fantasy setting. She is in the real world, and she is a siren, which means she can pretty much glamour or sing people into doing what she says, which is a pretty cool power to begin with. In her past, she called on the Bargainer, this high, powerful being who can come and make a deal with you. You generally get an IOU from him to take care of whatever deed you need him to do. She did this when she was younger, and our story takes off with him showing up asking for her to repay her IOUs. From there, we get into this high fae world. It turns out this bargainer, this is just kind of his daytime job, doing this bargaining. His real life and his real job is being the High King of the Night Court in a fae world. Yep. I know, we went there, and I loved it. Something is happening in this other world that he needs her help with, and the story just goes from there. I devoured this in one sitting. Is this amazing? Not really, but I loved it all the same. I'm gonna be honest, this is such a guilty pleasure version of ACOMF. It's not the epic scaled world that her series is. It's a modern, somewhat urban, sexy time story. and I loved it. I really loved it. And then the last book that I want to talk about is The Temptation of Adam by Dave Connis. This was sent to me by Sky Pony Press. Thank you, Sky Pony, for being amazing. But this was super intriguing to me. First of all, it's blurbed by a lot of people. It's blurbed by Aldi El Said, Nick Stone. It's got good names on it, and it definitely has that feeling of YA contemporary that's dark. It's set in modern society where there are a lot of issues that are running rampant, and we're actually going to talk about it, not just deal with fluffy romance. But basically, this is following Adam, who, at the beginning of the story, something happened in school that is going to cause him to either be expelled, or he has the option to be suspended for 80 days and go through sex addicts programs and come back to school later. So we don't know what happens. Obviously that's setting the tone for the story though. So we are dealing with a boy who is addicted to porn, and I was so intrigued by this book because that's a topic that's real, that happens in society. It's actually very common now with all of the internet being forced down your throat. Porn addiction is a very real thing, and I love that it was finally tackled in a YA book, and it's super real. This book, while it's very heavy and deals with very heavy topics, so if addiction is an issue with you, definitely don't pick this up, but it deals with addiction help groups and just kind of the ways to go about dealing with addiction and bettering yourself. And while this book does definitely deal with dark topics, it also is somewhat of a lighthearted book. We're reading from the perspective of a teenage boy, so it's gonna be very bonerific and hilarious. He's also a very real character, and his family is super relatable. They play Settlers of Catan. If that is mentioned in a book, I am sold on it, because hello, my family plays Settlers, like that's our life. And anytime that's brought up in a book, I'm just like, yup. So it's pretty much him going through these self-help groups and addiction support groups and meeting a girl who is in it, and them trying to figure out if they can be in a relationship or if it's just gonna be like a corruption of their own addiction because they'll be addicted to each other. It just dealt with really heavy topics. There are a few moments that maybe like have to put it down and be like, whoa. So this book, I'm gonna highly, highly recommend it if you're into the like somewhat darker YA contemporary where we're dealing with really raw topics that need to be discussed. Definitely pick this up. I really think it's a beneficial book to be out right now in the book world. So those are all of the books that I've read so far. You guys were asking for some reviews. There are some reviews, and I was pretty excited about it. So that's it for this video. I hope you guys are reading some amazing books. Let me know what you are reading and I will add them to the TBR. And I will see you in my next video.